All right. Well, welcome everyone. Really excited to see some familiar faces this evening as we talk about and conclude what we call the design workshop, the closing presentation. Excited to have had a great week. Of course, we would have loved to have been in person during this time, but it looks like there's a lot of familiar faces. And so I'm going to be pretty brief on project overview. And so what I'm going to do is jump into our agenda. Just show you what we're looking at for the evening. We have about an hour and a half of your time, so thanks again for tuning in. We'll go over the project pretty quickly. You all know and feel probably really well versed in what we're talking about, and we'll start to jump into some of the design workshop and some of the ideas that we've continued to advance this week. We're really looking forward to sharing that with you, and especially looking forward to getting some feedback and having a good amount of time to discuss some of the ideas and your thoughts. Quickly, virtual housekeeping. I'm going to breeze through this as well. You all know you're muted upon entry. If you have questions, though, I want to say you're welcome to chat them to us at any time. Here's where the chat function is, and just send along a question as you have. We are recording this call so that it will be posted online and others can view it as they would like to after the meeting, and so it'll be on the project website. Just want to mention that. Western Arden Arcade, again, a project initiated by Sacramento County, and my name is Cindy Zerger. I am the project manager, urban designer with Tool Design Group, and we are here as the consultants along with Opticos. Our firm, Tool Design, specifically focuses on making streets more livable, more walkable, more bikeable, and of course, more comfortable with all modes. And then we've partnered with Opticos, who's a great urban design firm, and they're really specializing in the built form and the work there. I will go through this quite quickly, but you know this is a 16-month planning effort with this county looking specifically at this study area, and our focus is again creating walkable, bikeable, livable streets. It's a complete streets project, and with a particular eye on sustainability and equity through transportation options and of course the built form idea. So quickly, this is where we are in the process. We are at the end of our design workshop. We will continue to refine some of the designs. So I shouldn't say the design work is done at all. We're still we'll still continue to work on that. We will have ongoing engagement opportunities during the fall and through the end of the plan. These will be opportunities and other potentially open house kind of format to provide feedback on the draft plan. And again, you'll be able to weigh in at that point in time. And we have some great student engagement coming up next week, or excuse me, in the coming weeks as well. So this was basically our week at a glance. We had a great opening presentation on Monday, continued to advance some of our ideas Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday as a design team, and had some additional stakeholder interviews or listening sessions, and then closing the week with this presentation and hopefully your feedback. I encourage you to look at the website if you haven't been there. Christy Grabo, our project manager, has been doing a fantastic job of updating the information there. And actually, I'd like to pause here and ask if Christy has anything she wants to say at this time, and welcome folks as well.
Thanks, Cindy. Hi everyone, I'm Christy Grabo, Associate Planner with Sacramento County and the project manager for this project. I'm pretty excited to show and share with you what this team has been working on and to hear your feedback on what they have to present tonight. Before we dive into the presentation, I do want to share kind of similar to what Cindy said, share our appreciation from Sacramento County, Tool Design, and Opticos for all of those who've been along for the ride for the Discovery Workshop hosted back in August, and for this design workshop that we've done this week. It's been great to connect with all of you and to hear your thoughts and experiences to help create this visioning plan. For those new to the project, welcome. We're glad to have you attend and look forward to hearing from you as well. Like Cindy said, this is still a draft document. It's not finalized, so please stay connected again with the website and sign up for the project emails. But thank you for all the involvement we've had thus far. Thanks, Cindy.
Thanks, Christy. And again, a reminder that the county is doing some great work around a number of different initiatives, and this nests well and I think helps advance a lot of the different ideas that the community has, and of course, some of the initiatives at the county level. We've met with a number of folks throughout your community, 23 different organizations, a number of which are on our community advisory group. We've had a lot of folks, again, tune in by these meetings and online survey. And again, we're going to have a great session, hopefully with students in the coming couple weeks. Throughout the process, we've heard, I'd say 6 key points from your community about the importance of that it's a diverse and family-friendly community, and you value that diversity. You want to create a vibrant neighborhood with a strong identity, improving accessibility, and creating opportunities for local businesses and current residents to reside and stay in the area. We've heard about the importance of a safer and more comfortable public realm, and advancing sustainability and equity, excuse me, through different types of design interventions. So those, again, really set the tone, I would say, for what you saw during the design discovery workshop, and of course, our design workshop. So what we've heard this week, we've asked some more particular questions around the cross sections. We'll talk about that again this evening. And then we've asked more questions around some of the built form. And we heard the importance of seeing landscape shade and comfortable street amenities. Seeing community spaces to gather with activities, not just for commerce, but also for youth and families to gather throughout the community. And the importance of, we asked specifically about neighborhood streets and how we could advance some of those ideas in our first workshop. And we heard that there's large support for advancing those ideas too. So based on all the community input, I'd like to just mention again our design directives, creating that comfortable, safe places to walk and bike. Opportunities for shade and trees and landscaping, creating a sense of community identity, and creating nodes of activity with cohesive connections. So again, with those design directives, we dove in again this week, and I'm going to give you an overview. We're going to give you an overview of kind of what we worked on this week. So we focused a lot on the elements of the street. So what does that mean in terms of designing for comfort and safety and experience? We'll talk a little bit about how that looks like on a sidewalk, bikeways, and different elements. The importance of a network. We continue to advance the idea of these framework streets, and we'll dive into that and some examples. We'll talk about neighborhood spot treatments and those ideas there, and then we'll talk about context appropriate redevelopment, so opportunities and the built form, and what we've heard from you and how that's then advanced into some design solutions. And then at the end, we'll talk about how it all sort of comes together at the Arden Way, specifically 2 community nodes, Arden Way and Watt, at Watt to Morse, and then Hurley and Fulton. Throughout, we'll be doing some interactive polling during the presentation. For those of you who are joining by phone, the online polling doesn't work for you, but I want to mention that we will continue to ask these questions at the end and have a more detailed discussion at that time. So back to the street elements. Some of our guiding principles that emerged through a lot of different conversations with folks is about considering the most vulnerable users first. So that's our design vehicle, as it were, or how we talk about it. Think beyond what we call the American Disabilities Act compliance and employ best practices in universal design. So this is thinking about how we really accommodate folks who have any kind of mobility or impairments and how they navigate our streets. Safety and comfort and experience. I want to stress experience in this. Safety and comfort, of course, are paramount. Experiences too, so that it becomes a memorable place, a place you want to go to and stay and linger. And then we'll talk about, specifically, how those are manifest in sidewalks, bikeways, green infrastructure, parking, and utilities. So sidewalks, you've seen a graphic similar to this previously, and I just want to mention again the importance of really clearly setting up different zones of your sidewalks as we think about redevelopment opportunities, and we think about how people navigate spaces, keeping this what we call a pedestrian through zone very clear and clear of obstacles and delineated through its own material is a very simple but important way to make it more comfortable and safe for everyone who navigates our streets. Creating clear furnishing zones. So all of your bike parking or your trash receptacles and seating happens in this furnishing zone, or even in the ancillary zone, which would be your parking areas. That's opportunities for bike parking as well as, of course, on-street parking. And then really important as well, is along the frontage zone of your building faces, and in some instances along parking lots, how we make those a comfortable edge. Bikeways, we're talking about a number of bikeways to the community. All of the actually arterial streets, or the main streets, network streets that you have in your community, are identified in the bike plan to become bikeways if they don't already have bike provisions. And what we like to suggest to communities that have the space is to make bikeways as comfortable and protected and as possible. So that's removing the bikeway from on street, if at all possible, or creating some sort of buffer. And some real key design moves or details are paving changes, so that it's clear what mode goes where. So clearly delineating where people bike and where people walk. How we handle conflict, what we call conflict zones, at any areas where pedestrians are or where we have driveways. So this image on the right shows a bikeway along with an adjacent sidewalk. They're separated, but as they go across a driveway, there's clear pavement markings that show that the bike and the pedestrian have priority, and the cars are know to slow down through those thresholds or through those driveway aprons. Just some really important aspects. We know that green infrastructure is something that folks have talked about a lot, about the importance of handling the stormwater. You have some flooding issues in some areas, and how we can kind of advance that in the public right-of-way will be really key and can be a real positive for the community. So opportunities at curb bump out areas, you can see in the upper left image here, as we bump out at certain intersections, those become extra space where we can do green plantings and deal with the stormwater on site. So how we can think about that in the street interventions that we're talking about, you'll see in some areas we're suggesting landscape plantings. These can be typical landscape plantings. They can also be green infrastructure or stormwater planters like you see in these images. Parking opportunities along the area too, as we talk about some of the redevelopments. Sometimes that means interior parking areas may be changed, reconfigured a little bit, but there are opportunities to park along the streets as well, and allowing for that to happen. Those become opportunities also for green infrastructure, like I've showed before. Some of these bump out areas you can see in this graphic here, a number of them have these what we call bump outs and have green infrastructure, and it's important. It's an important aspect of for the parking bays. It sort of clearly delineates the space. And then they become opportunities to make it feel less like a sea of parking. You can interrupt the long parallel parking area with an additional bump out here and there to add shade trees and add amenities throughout the streetscape. One thing that we'd like to talk about too and suggest, long term is as you're thinking about redeveloping or reconstructing some of the streets in the areas, thinking about the opportunities to underground your utilities. It provides a really great opportunity to do that when you're reconstructing your streets. So this is an example on the right of Fulton, where that's happened. You've done that in your community, and we'd say continue to do that as you can, and as the county has the ability to redesign the streets. This is Arden Way on the left. And so as you think about reconstructing that space, really a great opportunity to think about undergrounding if it's feasible. So onto the network of streets. So those are just some ideas around sort of how streetscapes can advance the people first idea. And in terms of the network, same basic principles is creating a people first approach and thinking about these in terms of the different types of functions that the streets play. So we've created a network, or we're suggesting a network of commercial corridors, parkways, and neighborhood connectors. I'm not going to dwell too much on the slide. I'm going to move to the next one, which is we're going to break this down into different ideas here. So a commercial connector, those are streets we're considering, and it's part of your general plan in terms of the language. A commercial corridor is something that allows for access and to different businesses. And so some of the areas in particular, streets in particular, are Howe, Fulton, Arden Way, and Watt as key commercial corridors. And these are going to be perhaps the ones that are closest to any of the goods and services and the businesses that the community has. And here's an example starter idea of what we're thinking. We proposed this last time, and we're saying it still has a good merit to rethink how some of Fulton is repurposed to be more comfortable and to create a better walking and biking environment. So you can see in this instance on the right, the graphic shows the implementation of generous sidewalks along with a separated bikeway facility, some green landscaping, and to do that, it would require rethinking the space that's allocated to motor vehicles. And we've looked at the traffic volumes on the street and think this is definitely a feasible option along Fulton Boulevard, Fulton Avenue, excuse me. So what that might look like, again, we've shown a number of these images at this point, but bikeways adjacent and right next to the sidewalk, but clearly delineated by material changes. There's some different best practices we would suggest there. And then again, the incorporation of great opportunities for green infrastructure along these areas. So I think I'm going to pause there, and I'm going to turn it over to Malia to talk about our quick poll. So Malia.
Hi, everyone. So we're going to do just a really quick poll to get some feedback on this starter idea for Fulton Avenue. And Cindy mentioned earlier, so if you join the meeting with your computer, you will see an online poll pop up within Zoom. If you've joined by phone, you won't be able to participate in these polls, but we will be able to get your feedback in the Q&A. So you should see in just a second a poll pop up on your screen, and feel free to answer. The question is, do you support the starter idea changes to Fulton Ave? And we have from strongly against to strongly support. So please feel free to enter your response now. And we'll give it about 30 seconds, so feel free to answer. We have a couple votes in. I'll wait for a few more. So if you haven't yet answered, please do.
Are you accepting mail-in ballots? Just asking.
All right, so we have a majority are strongly supporting. I think we also had a message in the chat, and we're happy to address that later in the Q&A. But you should see the results. We had 63% strongly support, 21% support, and 16% neutral. So thanks for voting.
Thanks, Malia. I think I can close those results. Hopefully that stops share for everyone. Onto the Parkway, I'm going to turn it over to Ian to talk a little bit about an idea that we have for Alta Arden Expressway. We'd love to be able to call it a parkway in the future. So Ian, go ahead.
Thank you, Cindy. Well, this is an exciting corridor. It's an east-west corridor in the north part of the study area. And it just ends at Watt as a 5-lane road, and it doesn't carry enough traffic to warrant 5 lanes. And so we were thinking, if it were a 3-lane road, what something cool we could do with it, and we thought we could turn it from a expressway into the Alta Arden Parkway, and recycle the space into a fairly natural corridor, which would feel safe and comfortable for folks, as you can see in the image, creating a really nice kind of natural experience through the city. We would design it with shade, to be comfortable when you're walking and cycling, and with lots of things to do on the sides. Some of the places need access roads, so those areas would have access roads, and where we don't need those, we would use the whole area for kind of a linear park. So something like you see on the right. Here's some examples of natural areas and programmed areas in a couple of places. So it's kind of limited only by our imaginations what would happen. We have some kind of starter ideas to get the juices flowing. One of the characteristics of parkways is this sort of nice continuous experience through the park, and instead of stopping and starting. So one of the things that we're thinking about is controlling the intersections with roundabouts as opposed to signals, and that gets rid of the clutter of all the signals and creates a more natural feel. And so in San Diego on La Jolla Boulevard, they had a 5-lane arterial, which you see in the top left, and it was redesigned and narrowed to 3 lanes. And because of the efficiency of roundabouts, it still processes the traffic well. And they used the space for parking, wide sidewalks, street trees. And you see the roundabout on the bottom right, and beautification. And it had a really great social effect and economic effect on the corridor. Very enjoyable place to be. You can see the difference between the top right image and the 2 on the bottom right. That's a little bit of inspiration right out of California. And so it would go the whole length of the study area and probably involve 8 roundabouts at the 7 current traffic signals, and probably one at, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but it's Wida Way. So that would be the corridor. Next slide. And so this is just one idea of what it could look like. So we've got sidewalks straight as we can on the edges. Maybe they bump out a little bit here and there to make room for a bench or something like that. We want to create a complete territory for the park between the sidewalks. We have a 2-way separated bikeway on the north side, and then the 2-lane street and 3 lanes at intersection parkway down the way. Now you'll notice there's a driveway, and in this starter idea, we've put the crossings together, and it's about a car length back from the stop bar. So this allows motorists to focus on the crossing when they're going across the crossing, and when they're trying to turn left or right onto the parkway, they can focus on that and not have to worry about crossing the bike and the pedestrian facilities at the same time. And then crossing the street, we have a median for a refuge, so you only have to really cross 1/2 of the street at a time. And in this case, we raised it to make it conspicuous and help keep the motorists behaving themselves and going at a nice, safe speed. And then along the way, we can have seating so people can rest. We have some sculpture. There's a fix-it stand for your bike, an exercise station. But you can imagine all the different things we could have down the parkway to keep it interesting and keep it engaging. Next slide. And one of the criticisms of roundabouts is they're not friendly for people who are blind or have poor sight. And so we've developed a roundabout design that has about 10 interventions that make it much friendlier for people who can't see. You know, for example, lining up the sidewalks properly and straight, and having tactile guides to help them find their way to the crossing and then across the street itself. So that's the crossing just with the pedestrian crossing. And then if the bike facility were to cross, it's very similar, except you have the addition of a bike facility, like in the next slide. So there it is. This is the exact same thing, except it's got the 2-way bike facility as well. So the crossing is just a little bit wider to accommodate both the pedestrians and the cyclists. So that's how you cross the street. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. So we'll turn it over to, again, want to do a quick poll and turn it over to Malia to facilitate that.
Great. So we are going to take another poll very similar, this time for Alta Arden Expressway. Do you support the starter idea changes to Alta Arden or not? And you should see the poll pop up on your screen right now. So feel free to start voting. All right, we have a bunch of people, a bunch of votes in, maybe a few more trickling in.
I'm in my meetings.
I'll end it for now and share the results. We had 72% for strongly support and a few others who are neutral and also support. So thanks again for giving us your feedback on this cross-section.
Great, and we saw some questions also come in, so looking forward to having another discussion at the end. So another, oops, sorry, the slide just advanced. Another kind of type of street worth considering or would suggest is a neighborhood connector. And these are streets that are really important to the community and perhaps are a little bit lower in volume, provide connectivity. People walk, bike along these as well. And these are Cottage Way, Bell Street, Northrop, Hurley, and Morse. And Bell in particular, as it serves a really important function connecting folks to the neighborhood schools. So this is the starter idea that we are considering there. And we mentioned this at the last, this discovery workshop as well, and continue to get feedback on this, that this is something that people would like to see, a real formalized bikeway opportunity for people to walk and bike, to bike along there, and then also a more formalized sidewalk. So we can easily repurpose. Right now it's one lane in each direction, and there's opportunities to really repurpose some of the space from the existing bikeway on street and the parking on one side. We can consolidate that onto one side and really make it a wonderful space accommodating all modes. So what that might look like, again, neighborhood street with a bikeway, some different examples here to give you a sense of that. So I'll go to the next slide and we'll quickly do our last poll as it relates to the cross sections.
So this last poll will be for Bell Street, and the same question as before. Do you support these starter idea changes to Bell Street? You should see it pop up on your screen right now. A couple votes coming in. We'll give it a few more seconds to see that everyone gets a chance. Great. So similar to the previous two cross sections, it's great to hear that folks are really strongly supporting our proposed starter ideas. So thanks again for that feedback.
Thanks, Malia. One of the things we heard at the last, during the last week and during this week as well, is the importance of considering neighborhoods, the neighborhood streets within the area as well. And so we talked a little bit on Monday night about spot treatments and the options that we could advance there. So we took some of the comments to heart and came up with about 7 different cross sections or spot treatments to share with you. I'll just talk through all of these at this time. So high visibility crosswalks really increase visibility of people walking and increases the opportunity, the propensity of people who are driving to yield to pedestrians. So where these can be installed, any crossing really within a neighborhood or as the neighborhood connects to and across some of the major streets. Example locations, we just want to tee up a couple of those as well. Bell Street and Hurley Way and Greer Elementary and Encina High would be great examples of where this could work. Curb extensions, we've talked about this a few times, and we have opportunities for green infrastructure as well, but these are really important for pedestrian safety. They reduce crossing distances and they slow down turning vehicle speeds. These could happen at neighborhood streets where they meet larger streets, also at mid-block crossings, at intersections with on-street parking as well. So an example would be at Bell and Hurley, for example. Lots of examples of where that could work. Pedestrian refuge islands. These are also great features. You have some within your communities, particularly at the on Morse near the Kaiser Permanente campus. They shorten crossing distances for pedestrians, especially as you think of 2 different lanes going in 2 different directions. You know, it basically cuts a 4-lane street down to a 2-lane street for people to cross. It slows turning vehicles slows turning vehicle speeds as well, and increases visibility for pedestrians. Again, these can be very helpful at multi-lane crossings, at intersections or mid-block. Watt and Bodega would be a great example of where something like this would be recommended. Raised crossings, as well as the high visibility crossings, also help in yielding and slowing down vehicle speeds and making pedestrians more visible. They can happen on local neighborhood streets, mid-blocks, or at intersections as well. And in some instances, we see these used at driveways as well. So a place at Northrop at Dornejo, as people cross to Swanston Park, we heard about the importance of really addressing that crossing right now. There's been a good attempt at an intervention, and I think we can, there's ways to maybe make it even better for folks. Rapid rectangular flashing beacons, or RRFBs as they're called, are flashing lights that pedestrians could push that create an awareness on the street. They actually flash on and off for motor vehicles to observe, and increases yielding and slows down vehicles. There could be a number of different locations throughout the community on Watt. We see some great opportunities for them to happen as well. Pedestrian scale lighting could really help people feel safer and be safer along streets within Arden, West Arden Arcade. It increases the visibility, makes people feel more safe as well. Any street, frankly, could, especially the major network streets, could benefit from more pedestrian scaled lighting. Internal to some of the neighborhoods, there could be opportunities for traffic circles. So these could be at lower speeds. They lower speeds at minor intersections, and they could happen on neighborhood streets where people often speed through the area. So they're a really great device to use, and often can frankly enhance visibility, and these planted areas, these middle areas, can be really fun art opportunities for communities as well. I'm going to hand it off to Mitali now, who's going to talk a little bit about community assets and some of the work that they've been doing on the built form.
Hi, everyone, and good evening. It's great to be here. And I'm just going to run through very quickly about some of the work that was done in the previous workshop, and there's more like a recap of where we are right now. So we started our analysis and trying to understand what's happening in West Arden Arcade by just looking at what all is existing here and the community amenities. So that's a technical term, but essentially it means all the places where people like to go, places that the community feels are important. And as you can see, there's quite a wide variety of these in Arden Arcade. And what that means is that, there's this concept of a 15-minute neighborhood in which people can actually find it enjoyable and safe and practical, at times even more, they actually save time by doing it, in accessing all these destinations on foot or on bike rather than driving. And we feel that West Arden Arcade already has some of the fundamentals that are needed to make this concept happen. On the next slide. So what we did was that we looked at this layer of all the community assets, and then we also looked at the street hierarchy that Cindy just described previously, and that led us to the concept of creating nodes and corridors within the community. So this is what is illustrated here, and just depending on the intensity of users and traffic volumes and just the general development existing on certain corridors, we get a category of the town center node, which are all, as you can see, located on Arden Arcade and on Arden Way. And you also get supplementary neighborhood centers. So these are smaller in scale. All these nodes are inherently mixed use, but the difference is that there is, like some of them are more intense and more commercial in character, and the others are more local and neighborhood serving. So at the same time, this is again a recap of what we discussed in the opening presentation a couple of days ago, which is the importance of built form in shaping the way the public realm and the street engages with what is happening inside the buildings. So there are simple things such as the shape and the positioning and the orientation of buildings, such as where are the entrances, what is happening on the ground floor, and what's happening on the sidewalk and the street. So all of these function together, and they support each other in creating the kind of walkable and safe environment that we're all aspiring for West Arden Arcade. So I'm not going to go into detail, but as you can see, these are just best practices for the kind of design principles that we must follow for built form. And these don't change whether we're designing at a smaller scale or a larger scale or a commercial building or a residential building. These are just general good principles to follow in order to create, again, active, safe, and interesting spaces for us. So simple things such as orienting buildings towards the street and sidewalk, orienting buildings towards public spaces, trying to create more public spaces and adding to the public realm. And very importantly, and something which is very visible in West Arden Arcade, is the screening of parking and service areas. So there are many different ways of doing this, but yeah, right now we're just talking about the very principle that we know that parking is a reality and it's required and it's needed, but at the same time, it doesn't need to be what you see most of all when you're walking and driving, even driving along streets. So as you can see, this is an example. This is from Sacramento, in which you see that this is not like a very fancy building. It's not a very grandiose looking building. It's a small mixed use building. And at the same time, behind that, there is a parking lot. But there are simple strategies such as the way the building is oriented, where the entrance is located, the fact that they have these breezeways and corridors kind of shielding the parking. That creates a very inviting environment. So you can imagine that when you're walking on the sidewalk next to this development, it would not feel that you just want to hurry up and cross quickly. It creates a better pedestrian environment. Moving on. So tied into that is also this underlying concept of placemaking. Now, this is, again, one of those catchphrases that you hear a lot, but the fundamentals are simple, that we need to make places enjoyable. We need to create some sense of identity, and this can be done in a million different ways. So on this slide, we're just showing some of the basic things that we need to keep in mind when we're considering how to design these spaces. And the more the local the flavor, the stronger the identity would be for such a place. So this is a mix of street furniture, lighting. Lighting is critical towards making places safe and welcoming at all times. You have simple things like signage of different kinds, street furniture, lighting, murals on the walls, even like public art, and at times even graffiti. You know, they all help in just identity and identifying what is unique about a place. During this workshop, we also discussed that considering the rather large amount of space within the community that is given over to parking and other such areas which are not fully utilized, what are the temporary and flexible uses that we can try and think about to make better use of such spaces? So this could be a combination of pop-up restaurants. We talked about food trucks, even like temporary creation of public spaces and play areas, farmers markets. You know, there are limitless opportunities. You know, I think that was a term that Ian was using a few days ago in describing that just what all we can do with these spaces. All it takes is imagination, and none of these need to be expensive or permanent, but they really help in creating a sense of community. Next slide, Cindy. One of the ideas that we heard during the past couple of days, and which really resonated with us, was the opportunity to create a community garden. Now, this is something that would really fit one of the neighborhood nodes, such as the one that we're looking at in detail at Fulton and Hurley. And there are many different things that can be achieved by this. It's not just the question of creating a way for the community to come together, maybe even engage the local schools, but it's also a wonderful use of space that may not be currently getting utilized very well. So here are some examples for us to consider. So now we're going to just talk about the two areas that we picked up and did initial designs for. So one is along Arden Way from the intersections of Morse to Watt. As you can see, here are some images that show the existing conditions. As we mentioned earlier, as you can see, there are most of the area is just taken up by parking. And there are buildings, and not all the commercial buildings are doing very well, but some are thriving. So let's see what we can do with a node of this kind. So the next slide. So this is again an aerial view, and you can see what's going on. We have the Safeway building, which is the larger building that you see on the lower left. And there's a McDonald's building. Yes, and if you could just point out that lot itself. So this is just to help you understand the different components of this node. And across the street to the north of Arden Way, we have the couple of churches and several other institutional buildings. Along Professional Drive, you have a number of smaller scale buildings that have a mix of office and further north residential buildings. Now, what we did find was that a number of these uses, a number of these properties are actually lying vacant, and not all of them are doing very well. So again, a lot of this is on private land, so we're not kind of requiring anything to happen. These are just ideas and concepts to explore as these areas naturally redevelop. So you can see our design concept over here. In this, the existing buildings that are remaining unchanged or untouched, those are in gray. And the potential new buildings that could fit here without disrupting any of the existing uses are shown in that golden yellow color. As you can see, we're talking about smaller scale buildings and nothing which requires wholesale demolition of any portion of the site. So these are kind of smaller scale mixed use buildings that just help in creating more diversity and a wider variety of uses for these nodes. And again, moving back to the overlying principle of why is the build form important, because we're trying to make all these improvements to the street right-of-way and making it a more pedestrian and bike-friendly environment. But a lot of those moves need to be supported by what's happening within the build form, the uses and activities, and just the fact that more people would mean improved safety for these areas. So I'm not going to go over these in detail because these have just been discussed when the cross sections were discussed just a while back. But over here you see Arden Way, and the highlights in terms of the transportation improvements are the separated bikeway and a much wider sidewalk, as well as an access lane. That is not very clear in this graphic, but you get the location. It's on the south side and on the north side of the main right-of-way. The advantage of having this access lane is better access to all the businesses which are there and creating a slightly more calm and a more accessible environment that would help also strengthen this mixed-use environment that we're trying to create. Also, we added in a couple of protected pedestrian crossings because this is a really long block when you look at the major intersections, and that helps in just stitching the north and south sides across Arden Way better. Now in this, those were the transportation improvements. Right now, this graphic is just highlighting the land use and build form improvements. As you see, we tried to insert build form in places where we found that either the parking was not getting fully utilized or areas where we can create what we would like to call secondary addresses. Now, what that means is that when we have really deep blocks, you can kind of go vertical to the main arterial, which in this case is Arden Way, and we kind of pull some of that activity inwards. So this also helps often strengthen the anchors, the anchor tenants which are in places like this, which in this case is a Safeway, for instance. So by creating some kind of mixed use environment that kind of feeds off that energy and just attracts more people, helps in both creating a new environment and also helps to further establish the businesses that are doing well. Accompanying that is also the addition of a lot of trees, not just in the right-of-way, but also in creating these smaller scale usable public spaces and just greening the area more, which was something that we heard again and again. And towards kind of the north east portion of the site, we have a number of properties that could in the future potentially redevelop, and we can kind of extend the street grid inwards as well. Now, here are a couple of views, and we can come back to these and discuss these in more detail during the Q&A session once these slides are done. Here is a view on Arden Way, and we're looking east. And you can see that towards the right, you have the two-way bike lane, again, separated by an alley of trees. And beyond that, you can see the access lane. And as you can see, the environment that's created here is very pedestrian friendly. We have all kinds of protected crosswalks and other facilities to make pedestrians much more comfortable of all ages and abilities. And the build form is what kind of adds that final layer to creating an inviting and welcoming place. So when these are going to be working in sync, which are the transportation improvements and the build form improvements, then that is what we feel would lead to a successful and a very vibrant kind of mixed use environment. Next. Yeah, so this is, again, it was a sketch of, the same node, and this is from a different angle. You're further inside on the access lane. And this is, again, looking east. So this is a closer up view of the build form and the fact that they have active ground floors. Again, we're not looking at very tall buildings, something that is very appropriate to the existing character, but it would be the addition of these new uses with a ground floor, like a mix of both active, by frontage, we mean like what's happening on the ground floor and what's activating the space. So some amount of retail that would also give opportunities for the existing businesses to evolve and occupy new spaces. Next slide. So this is a quick poll. Melia, I guess you'll be conducting this.
Yeah, so we're gonna open up polling about this town center node. And the question is, do you support the addition of housing in the town center node that Mitali was just talking about? And it's from strongly support to strongly against. So you should see the pop-up if you've joined via computer. All right, great. I think most people have gotten their answers in. We have a range of responses. Most folks are strongly support, and we have a few that are neutral or against, and a few that just generally support. So thanks for that feedback. Oh, sorry, I realized I wasn't sharing the results, but there you go. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, and that's good to hear. So now moving down the scale a bit, still a mixed use node, but our attempt at trying to see what can happen at a neighborhood node. So this is the intersection of Fulton and Hurley streets. The next slide. So this is what it looks like from an aerial view. To the south, you see Hurley Way and the street which is going north-south towards the left of the photograph. That's Fulton Avenue. And this, again, it's a large parcel. This is where the 24-hour fitness is, along with a few more retail pads. A couple of them are doing very well, and they seem to be fairly active. But at the same time, on the towards the north of the photograph, towards the top of the photograph, you do have some businesses which have been shut for quite a while. So this, again, presents an opportunity to think about what can happen should redevelopment happen in this place. So this is, again, our illustration. And again, these are illustrations. These are one example of what can happen. And there are many different ways of achieving very similar results. So I just wanted to state that. So in this, again, you can see that there's small scale infill, and there's a carving out of public space that could be more community serving. And at the same time, we're also trying to strengthen the connections across both sides of Fulton Avenue. The next slide. Again, just highlighting what the transportation-related moves are. As you can see, the improvements on Fulton Avenue were just discussed, so I will not get into that, but essentially it's creating a much calmer and a safer environment for pedestrians and bikers, cyclists. And in the dashed line, you can see where we're trying to create additional pedestrian connections across Fulton. So by that, we would have, what I mean is that we would have protected crosswalks. And this is, again, a way of trying to connect the users on either side of the street, just to increase mobility and to increase access for pedestrians and in general for all users. Now, in this example, as you can see, that the addition of the newer, smaller scale users also creates the opportunity to create different kinds of environment in different parts of this node. For instance, on the lower right-hand corner, you can see that we're showing that this has got good southern exposure, and this piece of land is a good opportunity for creating maybe a community garden. Now, this again need not be a permanent use. This can even be like for a certain amount of time, after which the uses can be re-looked at. But this is an area where we feel such a function can work well. And it also ties back to the fact that Hurley is used a lot by school-going families and students. And this was also the street on which Soilborne Farms was established. And I don't believe that they're there anymore, but there is a certain legacy that we can tie this design idea back to. Now, towards the towards the upper part of the image, you can see that we're trying to stitch together two ideas and creating this pedestrian connection. So more towards the left side of the image, you can see that there is an area where we're not adding a new building, but there is the scale of the parking lot, which is there, means that you can still keep a certain amount of parking, but also use the space for a different kind of function. Again, it can be temporary or permanent. And again, they can be anything starting from a plaza or some kind of a food truck venue, or even a place where you can have outdoor dining. The opportunities are many. Connecting that across the street is, sorry, if I could just go back to that slide. So by adding smaller scale mixed use buildings on the other side, which you see towards the top portion of the image, what we're trying to do is, again, creating this second address, and we're trying to kind of increase connectivity across the different blocks and trying to split up the scale of these really big blocks to bring it down to more of a human scale. And these are the new buildings that are being added are not just residential, but on the corner, we're also anticipating that there would be some mixed use and even just some retail buildings. Again, this is an issue that we're seeing in downtowns and in other areas across the country, that retail is kind of changing, and not all kinds of retail will continue to function in exactly the same way for the coming years. So by the addition of these smaller scale pads and this kind of mixed use environment, it will offer more opportunities for retail to just try and diversify and evolve as the years go by. So we're just trying to insert some inherent flexibility into the design concepts being forwarded here. Now, this is an image which is on Fulton Avenue looking north. So this is just an illustration of where the crosswalk can come, where you have that psychedelic colored Prius. That is where, that's just beyond the crosswalk. That's not been fully colored in. But as you can see, overall, the environment is really kind of humanized in a way. And you have this pedestrian refuge in the middle, which makes it much more convenient for people to cross the street. You also have separated bike lanes and generous sidewalks on either side. And all of these moves, along with the new built form, just goes to kind of create a much more vibrant and inviting mixed use environment. The next slide. So this is an illustration, again, looking east. So this is roughly in that location of that crosswalk that we were just looking at. So you can see, again, there are smaller scale buildings, there is mixed use or just retail on the lower floors. And all the principles that we talked about earlier about how the build form should address the sidewalk and just create an environment where people feel like being. All those are being illustrated through this example. And at the same time, we're just creating more opportunities for placemaking and for places to for people to gather and be.
So we're going to do another quick poll, this time about the neighborhood node at Fulton and Hurley streets. Natalia was talking about mixed use. This question is just about housing. And do you support the addition of housing at this neighborhood node at Fulton and Hurley? So we'll give folks a little bit to enter their answers. All right, a couple more seconds. Looks like most people have entered the poll. So we have a majority of strongly support, but a couple folks who are against or neutral as well. So thanks again for that feedback.
Yes, thank you, and thanks to everyone for being a part of that, we are now looking forward to diving into the poll. Was one way to just test the waters, and now we have a great about 34 minutes of discussion. So I will advance to the next slide, and I know we have some chats in the already, and then we'll ask you if you want to speak to raise your hand, and you can be unmuted. Malia, maybe you could help us in reading some of the chats at this time.
Sure. So I'm going to scroll back to see some of our earlier questions. We had one about lane reductions from Jennifer Harris. Her question was, I don't know how reducing to one lane instead of two would increase traffic, but the bike buffer looks good. I'm not sure what cross section you were talking about there, Jennifer. If you want to go unmute.
Fulton Avenue.
Oh, for Fulton? So I guess the question there is about traffic impacts on Fulton Ave.
I mean, I just don't know. I'm not a traffic engineer, so I don't know how taking the 2 lanes down to 1, if you're dreaming that the bicycle population is going to take over all that vehicular traffic. I mean, I don't know if that's feasible. It sounds great as long as the bikes are protected by something more than a stripe of paint.
Oh yeah, that's the intent, is that on Fulton, and we can look back at that cross section. But the idea right now, there is a bikeway, and the idea would be to fully separate it. And when we looked at the ADT, or the annual daily traffic, we've got the numbers. It looks definitely feasible to remove a lane, and actually it would be a wider sidewalk, a bikeway that is at sidewalk level and protected, and then generous landscaping in those areas. So opportunities for green infrastructure as well.
So when I'm driving my car on Fulton, it's a pretty long wait to get to each intersection. What I'm saying is, going down to one lane each direction, am I going to be waiting a whole lot longer? I say yes, but I'm not an engineer, so I don't know.
So I'll take a stab at the answer. When we've done lane reductions in other places where the roads are busy, there's a few things that happen. People go earlier or later. There's a redistribution through the network. There's a change in mode as well. So it's not the same traffic at the same time on the street once you do something like that. So that might help you wrap your head around it a little bit.
Thanks, Ian.
We had a couple folks in the chat asking about the issue of solar versus trees, and the idea of solar panels above parked cars. And I think the question is there room to do both? And I think those were from Ann Cole and Tom Nelson. So if either of you want to get off mute and elaborate on that question, feel free.
Well, let me first address the Fulton Avenue. I live right off Fulton Avenue, and it's a zoo right now. And one of the big issues that needs to be addressed, because the Fulton the Fair Oaks Boulevard complete street has been approved by the board, and it was excited the business people, which I don't see participating here, but they really were excited about it because it slowed traffic down. The big thing, there's a 5-lane intersection at Sierra, Fulton, and Monroe, and that has to be addressed too. And it's a very awkward corner, and the neighborhood is upset about it. But when you get up to Northrop and further north, I think what you're planning will be really great, because it's going to slow the traffic down, which is going to help the bikes and the pedestrians. Also, one of my rental units, yeah, I'm in that business, Vista Properties, it's going to help them amazingly to be able to get on bikes on Fulton Avenue. It's a disaster now even to walk on Fulton Avenue. And I think the whole plan is going to be a big improvement. And I think you'll find that with the health emphasis and, you know, people working from home, or most of my neighbors, I shouldn't say that, but a good percentage of them work at home. They have home offices. I think we're going to see a big shift in what people will do. And I know a lot of my neighbors are on bikes now, but you can't go very far. So anyway, now regarding the solar panels, it's a conflict. You know, they were going to use parking lots for solar panels, and they have done that at the thing. And then there's interference. You're going to have to really emphasize the energy producing aspects of roofs. So I think that has to be a consideration in the design, rather than and leave the shade for the well, you might be able to use both. I don't know. You probably have seen where it's used both. They're pretty ugly, those solar panels over parking lots. So I think that that's a design element that somewhere has to be addressed. Anyway.
Can I start?
Yeah. Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
So both those ideas are both green ideas, planting trees and doing solar. And so it's the right technology in the right place. So for example, down sidewalks on bike lanes, we'd like to see trees because that's where people are and they want the shade. But on other places like roofs, parking lots, you can entertain the solar. You can also entertain green roofs too, if you wanted to plant the roofs.
That's hard in Sacramento though. We don't get the summer rains that help the green roofs. It's like they do some places. But anyway, it's a thought.
Yeah, and I think I would also offer there's other opportunities for solar. You know, in I think it's become pretty a smart technology. So whether it's on top of buildings or any kind of the new footprints, that's another option, an opportunity in the area as well. So, Malia, did you have were there other comments?
There was another question in the chat, but I know someone has had their hand raised that's called in on the phone. So if the number starting in 916, ending in 1086, if you can take yourself off mute and ask your question.
Hi, this is Gene Lozano. Fulton Avenue, I basically have two questions, I guess, or in common. I think I heard that the bike lane would be raised and at the same level and adjacent to the sidewalk. And are you proposing trying to use the New Zealand texture to separate the bicycle lane from the walkway? I guess that's the first part. How are you going to separate pedestrians?
Yeah, Gene, that's a great question. And yes, we would handle that through a material change. And I know you've had good conversations with Ian about what that, how that may manifest. Ian, did you want to say something?
Yeah, we're going to call your friends in San Francisco and see what they recommended. And we also have some people who are knowledgeable about that in several of our offices. So we'll find the right separators so it's safe and effective.
Okay, well, I guess, and I'm certain you've considered this, but also at least consider on this thing, keeping the bicycle lane at grade, but perhaps one separated from the automobile traffic with a raised medium, maybe 6-inch, that's at least mountable for emergency vehicles, so that there is that physical separation between the traffic and so forth, which I think would be cheaper than actually pouring concrete, asphalt, whatever it would be to fill in the height, elevation, or putting the flexible delineators, which I know are less desirable, but I think the first one would at least consider that, then raising it. The other thing I'm concerned about is from a bus user, are the bus stops being still at along these actual sidewalk and not being floating bus stops? I hadn't heard anything about the buses there in Fulton or on Arden Way.
Yeah, that's a great question, Gene. And I think there are some solutions there where we prioritize pedestrians and make the distance between the walkway and we'll actually extend the walkway, frankly, to the bus wherever it happens to be. We've got some good guidance there. There are, of course, he mentions what's called a floating bus stop, and this is where the bikeway would slip behind the bus stop and then stay at that level. And so that there's some real options in terms of still creating the bikeway could be lowered, but then pedestrian crossing over to it is prioritized. There's some kind of design details we can talk about. The other option is the bikeway ramps down and is put into a different configuration, which would be putting it into street side, and that's not necessarily ideal, but there are some different ways that's handled. We've got great examples and have worked on projects where that's important. So thinking about transit will be a really important part of kind of a chapter or a part of a chapter for some of the design guidance we'll be encouraging the county to consider.
And I will finish because I know others have questions. Just from a cross disabilities perspective, because the Sacramento County Disability Advisory Commission has heard this repeatedly from the community and my blind organization, and that is not in favor of the floating bus stops. Want the bus stops to be right there on the sidewalk adjacent there, not having to go across, even if it's a raised crosswalk, having to go across a uncontrolled bicycle lane and possibly be hit by somebody going at a fast speed, and you won't be able to detect them coming at all. And that's a real safety concern. And if you're a senior citizen there, and if any of us get hit, but if you're a senior citizen, fragile, trying to get to the bus stop, and you're transit dependent and get hit by a bicycle, the outcome may not be that good for the person. So I really would say there's a time to compromise and let it be shared. The bus being permitted to go into the bicycle lane for just those a minute or two, whatever it takes, and get out of there to put people on the sidewalk. Also, that gives you the real estate to have an accessible bus stop. Otherwise, you're going to have at least 8 feet of a platform there at the bus stop to ensure that you have the access for the lowering of the ramp, and then some again off with the mobility device and making a turn one way or another, and that's a minimum of 8 feet. So you comply with the ADA, having it on the sidewalk, and greater safety. And so I'll be happy to talk further about this in another time, but just that's something very strong in this community, this anti-floating bus stop in the disability community. Thank you.
Thanks, Jean.
We have another question from the chat, and this is from a community member that cannot type, wanted to know that, will this project help with rent control or more low-income housing? Will this be able to provide displacement aid for the high homeless population? Will this help change frequency in bus routes? And does this plan include outreach plan designs for the elderly? So that's a bunch of questions in one, so happy to repeat for the team if needed.
Yeah, maybe let's address the housing one first. And I think the idea here is really to provide a mix of housing types, which can then be a mix of income levels or housing cost levels. I want to ask Christy to maybe respond to the housing element and how that may intersect with the kind of work we're doing here. We're not, that is not within our scope, is to talk about rent control in particular or to focus on that.
Cindy, I'll take that. This
Okay.
is John Lundgren with Sacramento County for everybody. The county is currently updating its housing element, and that is a part of our general plan, and we update that on an 8-year cycle. And so the conversation about rent control, affordable housing, and homelessness is happening right now in real time through this update process. And we'd be happy to have a conversation with anyone that's part of this. Christy's contact information is on this webpage for this project. And we'd be happy to point you to the housing element webpage and invite you to all of the outreach we're doing. It's not to say it's not important, but as Cindy said, this is a transportation project funded by a Caltrans grant. And obviously in the scope of work they've approved us for, this project won't be addressing rent control, but the county certainly knows that that's a very important topic that's on the top of the list for many people right now. Similarly with bus frequencies, as we know, regional transit is a special district. It's not entirely controlled by the county. And what I would hope is that the vision that our consultants have so skillfully put forward here, that as that vibrancy comes, as that demand comes, so comes the funding and so comes the bus service. And so what we want to do is, partnering, for example, with Jean, we want to make sure we set that built environment in a way that works with the bus service, understanding, yeah, we know that the bus service has been reduced, and that is a tremendous impact. Really understand that. I took the bus for a long time as part of my career. And I'm not going to say it was because I needed to, it was because I wanted to avoid paying for parking downtown. But I can relate to bus service, and when it gets cut back, it can really, really impact your schedule.
I think I saw Christine with a hand raised, if you want to unmute.
Yes. Well, first of all, I wanted to say that there are so many good aspects of this project for the community. They have the highest asthma rate hospitalizations and highest bike and pedestrian collisions and so on. But there is one aspect when you talked about the 6 key points of community engagement, I think one thing that is not listed there, and you heard it from a lot of people at the Monday workshop, and you've heard from us at SACAC, from Municipal Assistance Network, Black Child Legacy, is the, well, let me back up one. So we're very happy for everybody that one of the benefits of this project is increased property values, because we want everybody to thrive, right? Increased property values mean also higher rents and gentrification. So we would have, while we like so many aspects of this project, we would have a hard time supporting it unless there's some kind of anti-gentrification, affordable housing policy adopted with it. We have, we could give you plenty of stories already in West Arden Arcade. You know, that area has the highest percentage of people who are already, I'm trying to find the term. It's a term where too much of their income has to go toward housing, and they can't afford food and other things. It has the highest food insecurity, largely because people are already spending all their money with rent. So when we hear higher property values, we're like, yay for everybody, but we need to have some kind of policy provision or something for anti-gentrification. And we could give you plenty of stories if you want of people who work in this area, the people who do retail, the people who do fast food, the people who have some of the lower paying medical jobs, people who work here who will be forced out, who are already being forced out, but will be forced out even more as land values go up and rents go up. So anyway, I'd like to see more of a recognition of how many comments you've gotten on this from organizations and from individuals and from the community, and have that be in the 6 key points of community engagement. And also I'll look at, it's really, it's the impact of this project. If this was CEQA, we'd probably be tied to it legally, but the right thing to do is to look at anti-gentrification and affordable housing, which would be worse than, in spite of all the great things of this project, it's gonna hurt people.
Yeah, thanks, Christine. I appreciate that. Jennifer, we'll get to that hand raise in just a minute. I think we have another one as well. I just want to mention, I think maybe I didn't write it in the right framing, but the third or the fourth opportunity was idea of opportunities for local business and current residents to reside and thrive. So I think maybe we need to think about the reframing of that. And, you know, I think gentrification is a result, we all know it's a result of numerous factors in a community. It's you know, about adjacencies to cultural amenities, change in housing market, but also change in job market. So there's a lot of factors, and a lot of that is maybe excluded or not within the scope or focus of this project, but we hear you loud and clear. And I think there are aspects, we've talked with Christy, of course, and county staff about this, how we can make sure there is some language within our plan that says, you know, a recommendation. It's not going to be a policy recommendation, and it's not going to be policy focused, but I think there are definite things we've heard numerous times, you're right, Christine, about the importance of addressing this issue, and how we do that maybe in terms of suggestions, or that we heard it, and then this is a thought that the county should consider moving forward. But again, that policy purview of this is, again, outside of the scope of this project, but I really appreciate you bringing it up.
And it may be that we need to talk to the county about, we have concerns about this plan being adopted if there isn't an anti-gentrification or affordable housing provision, because you know, I think it's pretty foreseeable if one of the identified outcomes is that land property values are increased, that it's pretty foreseeable that that's going to mean that rents are going to go up too. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Christine. Jennifer, please. Hope you're on mute.
Just want to thank everybody so much for all the work on this. And I also want to ask, is there anyone on this design team who has been hired to do this, who has had their feet on the ground anywhere in this West Arden Arcade area? Direct question.
I have.
Are you the only one?
I am the only one of our team during the life of this project. Other folks have been in West Arden Arcade outside of this project, but we have staff certainly within our Oakland office as well who are from the Sacramento area and know West Arden Arcade well.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And I was going to ask also, it's to me very troubling that we have great designs that are in the works here. Meanwhile, there are some serious issues that we need to solve in our own community that will completely derail these plans if we don't solve them. I cannot imagine the Alta Arden Expressway becoming a green belt of sorts and being able to remain that way for its intended use, as opposed to becoming an instant homeless encampment, which we have to address this, and we have to, in my humble opinion, put the correct pressure on the so-called low-income housing in the area that is already existing, but is very blighted. And we all know there's no easy solution to mental health, homelessness, and all these issues. The plans don't reflect the reality. The pictures that you have shown do not reflect the amount of people who are living in a place that does not fit within this plan visually. And we simply must address the simple things that we can already do with just hard work, I guess, is what I'm saying. And I know I'm simplifying that, and there's no easy answer, but I just wanted to acknowledge that. And I thank you for your time and your work.
Well, I appreciate it, Jennifer, and I know you have a lot of extensive experience in the area, and I might just ask you, this is a Caltrans Sustainable Livable Communities grant that was awarded, and this was the scope of service that we could provide. What might you have done differently, or do you have thoughts or other solutions for a project like this?
That's a tremendously difficult question, because the folks who need to be in these meetings, the landlords who have troubled this area, I'm not, this is public information that there are certain landlords who have been exceedingly difficult to the families who live, the individuals who live in so-called low-income housing, and they are living in conditions that are simply solvable if the right steps are taken. I don't expect, that I could do that in a wink of an eye or something. I just want to say I appreciate all the hard work and all the people who are here.
And I appreciate your insight into this, and also there's some other kind of converging of issues that are coming up for you, and it's something that we want to continue to think about. But again, I would say our focus maybe doesn't align exactly with all of the coming up with all the solutions for all of the different aspects. So maybe there's another conversation at a county level and a local level that can happen.
I guess it's just really, this is very lofty thinking for a community where routinely, when I am driving down the street and I'm at a stop sign, folks literally put their trash out their window onto the roadway at the stoplight. And that's a foundational cultural issue for our Arden Arcade culture that we have to solve in order to be able to maintain and implement some kind of brilliant designs that are meant to be a solution.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Ian, did you want to say something? Did you unmute?
Yeah, there's, first of all, somebody else in the chat said there's a multi-agency approach to solving a lot of these problems. What you're talking about is not necessarily in our area of expertise. However, the design of the parkway is, and a lot of the issues in terms of things like vandalism and sort of not the artistic type of graffiti, but tagging places, littering, these sort of disrespectful type behaviors often come with what we call a hard environment, where we pave it and harden it, and there's nothing alive in the corridor, and people aren't comfortable in those types of places and they lash out, and that's why we see graffiti. I remember when I was studying graffiti, I went to a park. It was a beautiful park, but there was one electrical box that was way out of place, this big hard green thing, and it was tagged by graffiti. It was the only thing that would have been vandalized in the whole place. It was the only hard object. And if you go to those parking lots that are completely sterile, inevitably the walls are covered in graffiti. So what we try and do is we create a respectfully designed place that people can be proud of, and they don't vandalize it as much. And if we put trash receptacles that are convenient, they don't litter as much. But we also have to consider maintenance in these projects. We can't just build it and walk away. And so as we soften places, we change the materials, we change the look, we add shade, we make it comfortable for people for natural surveillance. And that changes a lot of behaviors positively. But we only soften it to a certain extent, because if it's too soft, it wears out too quickly and it takes too much maintenance. But there's this nice balance where you get a public realm which people are proud of and will defend rather than damage. And another good example is we had a playground that we were in a challenged, what everyone thought was a challenged neighborhood, and we needed to build a fence around it to stop the balls rolling out onto the street and so on. And the last thing we thought we needed was another chain link fence that looked like a prison. So we ended up building a little seating wall with shade trees so parents could sit and watch their kids play, but the little wall would stop the balls rolling out, and we let the kids paint a mural along the wall. No graffiti, no vandalism, a lot of pride. Had we done the chain link fence, it would have been a whole different story. So I think design can help address some of those issues, but not all of them.
Thanks, Ian. I want to also pass it off to Leanne Moffett, who's here and wants to say some words.
Well, thanks, everyone. I haven't participated too much, but I have been obviously actively engaged behind the scenes. My name is Leanne. I'm the County Planning Director. I have lived in this community block in the past. I live fairly close. I shop in the West Arden Arcade area all the time as an adjacent neighbor. So, you know, really following along, really excited by what the design team is doing. And we're really actively listening to the comments about trying to balance that gentrification issue versus the trying to combat blight and see some positive community reinvestment in the area. So I think we're really trying to actively listen to the community comments, trying to balance those two things out. You know, certainly we're in the kind of visioning phase here. There's a lot to run down and a lot of overlapping other activities were going on. I thought John Lundgren did a really great job pointing to the housing element work that we're doing, where we're looking at ways to increase funds for affordable housing. We actually did a board workshop on Tuesday about that. So you can go back and look at that, proposed a number of topics that are relevant to things that came up tonight, increasing our housing trust fund dollar amounts potentially, as well as other things. And there were some small things like Refugee Academy, a whole bunch of new programs that we proposed in the housing element. So again, a bit off topic for tonight, but for those of you who are interested in that topic, John provided the link to the housing element, and we're about to go out with a second round of public outreach. So we'd really like to encourage you to participate in that. And then we're also very actively working on the climate action plan. So please stay tuned for more on as it relates to some of the solar questions on that. And it is very intriguing thinking about something like Alta Arden and what we could do there. One of the thoughts that randomly occurred to me, the design team may hate it, I don't know, but I don't know how many really long running paths there are. And it occurred to me, given that Alta Arden doesn't have as many intersections or as many drive access. I wonder if that would be a crazy idea of activating it, given how many runners there are out in the world, and wondering where in this neighborhood they have a place to run, because activation, I think, is important in terms of trying to address some of the inappropriate homeless activities that can occur. So, and I think, Ian, you had a really great response there about trying to see that activity to try to passively deal with homeless, while other parts of our county partners tried to more proactively provide housing and navigators and other things in order to house those folks. So those were just a few thoughts that I wanted to say, and thank you everyone for participating. We're listening very actively.
Thanks, Leanne. I think, Talitha, did you have your hand raised as well?
I did. You guys are doing a wonderful job. I don't want to negate the fact that you guys have your limitations, because this is a Caltrans grant, and I do understand that you do have your limitations. But when we are envisioning and dreaming, you have to hear the people that are in the community so that you give them what they need. I hear what you're saying, Mr. Lockwood, but the experience that you're sharing is not ideal for the community that I come from for 22 years. So it sounds good, but like Jennifer Harris stated, feet on the ground in the community currently is a very important thing. And those are the people that you need to have in the room, because they do have the minds to be able to fit it into the Caltrans requirements that you're looking for, to be able to give you the verbiage that you need to actually envision a vision that's for the community, not for the blight of gentrification and homelessness that we don't want to talk about in this meeting, because that's not what we planned for. I definitely understand that. But if you invite the community and ask them what it is they need, and you get a common denominator of the need is not fitting into your vision, it may be that that vision may need to change. And I understand that we're still in the visioning phase, but I do want it to be heard loud and clear that if you do make these changes, the community will change, and those that were a part of it will no longer exist there anymore. So you will have ultimately eradicated families, decades of families, my family, to speak of it, a lot of them, because inevitably when you make things beautiful, landlords raise rents, and the people that could barely afford to live there in the first place will continue not to be there, which pushes us into low income areas and bad neighborhoods. And that is not what we want for the people that are barely striving right now. That's not why I moved there 22 years ago. And that's not why I'm fighting for you to hear our voices now. So please, I understand, but make sure that you allow the voices that are in this community to be heard. Not just listening, but applied, because we do have a vision that we would like to see that includes us.
So Talitha, that's a great point. When we started, we mentioned they're just starter ideas to get the juices flowing. We have an opportunity down that street to reclaim some space that's just used for, speeding and asphalt, and it's pervious, creating heat island and an unwalkable environment. Just little things like the view of the Kim Kwan Temple, can if we could change the street to make that a nice view, it could make someone's day, and they're walking by. I'd love, those are all just start ideas, and the idea is just to get folks thinking about it. And if we can change that design to reflect what people would like or could use, or use that resource of wasted space that's out there today for something that would benefit people, that's what we want to hear. So if anyone has any ideas, like jogging, do people like to run? It could be a nice place to run in the shade. Whatever the desires are, those are just starter ideas. So we don't want to import something that's not appropriate. It was just to get the ball rolling on how to reallocate those resources to, for a community benefit.
That's the benefit of getting your feet on the ground, as you see what people like to do here. And not to, I realize that the COVID pandemic has thrown a curveball. I offered, and I still will offer, I will wander around with my iPad or my phone and give you a walking tour of this area. Anybody who wants to see it, I'll drive around, show you anything you want to see.
And I'm willing to be an escort because I know this area. So if you want to walk it with somebody that can tell you the names and the faces of the people that you want to talk to that actually have been jogging in the neighborhood for 22 years, I can be there with you.
Reach out to some of the landlords who own multiple properties of low-income housing and see how they're taking care of their properties here.
Yeah. I appreciate the comments both of you, and I'd love to talk a little bit more about that. I think we've really tried to do an extensive community outreach to encourage people. We've done an exhaustive effort prior to the first design workshop and discovery workshop, and then of course during the life of this as well. And so if there are other ways that we can kind of course correct on that, I welcome it. I know being out there in the community, I saw a number of people. It was very interesting to see how many people are walking, how many people are navigating with mobility devices. That was very interesting to me from working across the country. I've seen a lot of communities like this. I'm California focused, and to see that in this particular area is something that is going to continue to be kind of a priority for me to think about who are the community members here and how do we design that fits that. So Talitha and Jennifer, perhaps we can have another conversation. I would encourage you to continue to be in touch. I know, Jennifer, we've been in touch. Be in touch with Christy Grabo as well, and we can talk a little bit more. I also want to respect it's 4 minutes after the end of when we said we would end. So, and I don't like to keep meetings long because that doesn't allow everyone who is here to hear all the comments. So I'm going to say let's adjourn for this evening. And I know Christy and John and Leanne and the design team will reconnect. And I'd love, again, to stay in touch with a number of you. Please, 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 I encourage you to go to the website and stay in touch. That way, all of this information will be posted there. And if there's information we can provide in terms of flyers and press releases or any of the social media work we've tried to do to turn people out, please let us know. So thanks everyone for your time and your really important and good comments and discussion. Thank you. Anything you want to say, Christy or John or Leanne?
Oh, well, just thank you so much for attending tonight and what we've done so far. I really appreciate all the involvement. Definitely do encourage to sign up for the housing element because we are doing the outreach effort that's kicking off next week. So if you can find the link from John, that would be amazing to set up, and love to have those conversations on housing countywide, not just Arden, but countywide. And yeah, we look forward to hearing from you guys more. Thank you.